Berlin, winter 2022. The streets are darker than usual, not because of war, not because of plague, but because the lights are dimmed by government order. Inside apartments across the nation, families huddle under blankets, watching their heating bills double, then triple. Factory managers in the Ruhr Valley stare at spreadsheets they can no longer make sense of. Energy costs have shattered every model, every prediction, every safe assumption about how a modern economy should function. This is Germany, the fourth largest economy on Earth, the industrial heart of Europe, and it is freezing. How did the world's most powerful industrial nation, the country that engineered the modern automobile, the nation that rebuilt itself from total destruction to become an economic superpower in just 30 years, how did it end up here? Vulnerable, dependent, trapped. The answer lies not in one decision, but in a chain of them, a sequence of choices, each seemingly rational at the time, that together formed what may be the most expensive economic miscalculation in modern European history. This is the story of Germany's $500 billion mistake. But before you assume you know the story, before you think this is about windmills or solar panels or climate activists, let me ask you a question. What if the real trap wasn't the green energy itself? What if the trap was something far older, far deeper, hidden in the mathematics of power and dependence? Stay with me. Because what happened to Germany is a warning, and the consequences are still unfolding. If you want to understand how nations rise and fall, how economic power shifts across continents, how one miscalculation can unravel decades of prosperity, then watch until the end. Because this story doesn't end in 2022. It's still being written. To understand the trap, we need to go back, not to 2022, but to 1998. Germany, reunified less than a decade earlier, is riding high. The Berlin Wall has fallen, the Soviet threat has vanished, the Deutsche Mark is strong. German factories are exporting machines, cars, and chemicals to every corner of the globe. Unemployment is falling, growth is steady, and the political class is asking itself a new kind of question. Not how do we survive, but how do we lead? How do we become not just an economic power, but a moral one? This is the moment when Germany's Green Party enters the federal government for the first time. And with them comes a vision of a future where Germany generates its power not from coal, not from nuclear fission, not from foreign oil, but from the wind and the sun, clean. Renewable, independent. It sounds beautiful, and in principle it is. The plan is called the Energiewende, the energy transition. It begins slowly. Subsidies for solar panels, incentives for wind farms, investments in grid infrastructure. The costs are manageable. The public supports it. Germany's engineering prowess makes it seem achievable. But here's the first hidden mechanism, the first thread in the trap. Renewable energy is intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine. The wind doesn't always blow, and Germany, located in Central Europe, is not a sunny country. It's cloudy. It's cold in winter. It's dark for much of the year. So what do you do when the wind stops and the sun sets? You need backup power. Reliable, constant, baseload power. And in 1998, Germany had that. It had coal plants. It had nuclear reactors. The renewable energy could grow slowly, supplementing the grid, reducing emissions over time, while the old system kept the lights on. But then politics intervened. March 11th, 2011. An earthquake strikes off the coast of Japan. A tsunami follows. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant suffers a catastrophic meltdown. The images are apocalyptic. Radiation, evacuation, fear. In Germany, a country with no earthquakes, no tsunamis, and some of the safest nuclear plants in the world, the reaction is immediate and emotional. Protests erupt. The Green Party surges in the polls, and Chancellor Angela Merkel, a physicist by training, a woman who once supported nuclear energy, makes a decision that will haunt Germany for decades. She orders the shutdown of all nuclear power plants. Not over 50 years, not over 30, over the next decade. By 2022, every reactor in Germany will be closed. The decision is popular. It is presented as moral, as cautious, as forward-thinking. But economically, it is a guillotine. Because nuclear power provided steady, cheap, carbon-free electricity. It was the backbone of Germany's industrial grid. And now that backbone is being removed with no replacement ready. Renewable energy cannot fill the gap. Not yet, not reliably. The wind farms are there, yes. The solar panels are there. But the storage technology, the batteries, the systems needed to balance the grid when the sun doesn't shine, those don't exist at scale. Not in 2011, not in 2015, not even in 2020. So what do? You make a deal. Enter Russia. For decades, the Soviet Union and then Russia had been selling natural gas to Western Europe. It was a stable relationship. Russia needed the revenue. Europe needed the energy. And natural gas, while not renewable, is cleaner than coal. It burns without the heavy particulates, without the black smoke. Germany begins to increase its imports of Russian gas. Not a little. Massively. Pipelines are built. Contracts are signed. By 2020, Russia supplies more than half of Germany's natural gas. The gas heats homes. It powers factories. It fills the gap left by the nuclear shutdowns. And here's the second mechanism of the trap: dependency. Germany's leaders tell themselves a story. They say that economic integration creates peace, that trade binds nations together, makes war irrational, makes conflict unthinkable. If Russia depends on selling gas and Germany depends on buying it, then both sides have an incentive to cooperate. This logic, called Wandel durch Handel, change through trade, becomes the foundation of German foreign policy. But it rests on one assumption: that Russia will always act rationally, that Russia will always choose money over power. What if that assumption is wrong? Let's talk about the cost. By 2021, Germany has spent over 300 billion euros on its energy transition. Subsidies for wind and solar, grid upgrades, bureaucratic programs. The average German household is paying some of the highest electricity prices in Europe, nearly double what Americans pay, yet the system is not stable. On windless winter nights, Germany has to import power from France, from Poland, from the Czech Republic. Often, that imported power comes from coal plants or nuclear reactors, the very sources Germany is trying to eliminate. German industry begins to notice chemicals, steel, aluminum, glass. All these industries depend on cheap, reliable electricity. When energy costs rise, their products become less competitive. Factories start moving, not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly. Investments shift to Poland, to the United States, to Asia, and then February 24th, 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. The world changes overnight. The European Union imposes sanctions. Russia retaliates. Gas supplies are cut. Pipelines are sabotaged. The price of natural gas explodes. In some months, it rises by 800%. Germany is exposed. The trap is closed. Without Russian gas, the renewable grid cannot function. Coal plants are frantically restarted. Emergency measures are implemented. The government spends another 200 billion euros, not on green energy, but on subsidizing gas, on preventing social collapse, on keeping factories open. 500 billion euros. That is the estimated total cost of the Energiewende so far. And what does Germany have to show for it? Higher prices, greater dependency, industrial decline, and emissions that, after decades of effort, are still not falling fast enough to meet the targets. So what went wrong? The trap was not the desire to go green. The trap was the belief that you could do it quickly, without planning for the gap, without maintaining the systems that keep an industrial economy alive. Nuclear power could have been kept online while renewables scaled up. Natural gas could have been sourced from diverse suppliers, not concentrated in the hands of one nation with a history of using energy as a weapon. But those choices required patience. They required accepting short-term criticism from activists. They required admitting that the transition would take longer, cost more, and involve uncomfortable compromises. Instead, Germany's leaders chose the path that looked bold, that felt righteous, that won elections, and the economic consequences are still unfolding. Today, Germany is deindustrializing, not by choice, but by necessity. Companies like BASF, one of the largest chemical producers in the world, are cutting production in Germany and expanding in China, in the United States, anywhere energy is cheaper and more reliable. Volkswagen, the symbol of German engineering, is closing factories for the first time in its history. The question is no longer whether Germany will remain an industrial power. The question is how fast it will decline and what will replace it. Let me leave you with this. History is full of traps like this. Decisions that seem wise in the moment, that are celebrated, that are presented as progress, but which create vulnerabilities that only reveal themselves years later. The trap is not usually the decision itself. It's the refusal to prepare for what happens when reality doesn't match the plan. Germany bet its future on a vision of the world where energy could be clean, cheap, and independent all at once. But energy systems are not built on hope. They are built on physics, on mathematics, on the hard realities of supply and demand. And when those realities are ignored, the cost is not measured in speeches or in applause. It is measured in shuttered factories, in cold homes, and the quiet erosion of national power. The $500 billion mistake was not spending the money. It was believing that willpower alone could overcome the constraints of the real world. And that belief, that trap, is one that nations will keep falling into again and again until they learn to see the world not as they wish it to be, but as it actually is. Germany's story is not over, but the illusion is shattered, and the consequences will echo for generations.